In this video, we're going to be talking about, in a long form style episode, the decisions that you have to make around selecting cane from the tube stage. So the decisions that you have to make about what is going to develop into a good reed and not. So, are you ready for this? It's morphin' time! Brontosaurus! As you probably know, I don't make these videos for money, and one of the real joys I get in producing these videos is to see my subscriber count go up. So if you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button and make sure that notifications are on so that you can find your way back for the next video. I hope you enjoy it. Hi everyone, this is another long form video where I'm talking about today cane selection from the tubes. A couple of things that I want to cover in this video. I want to show you a couple examples of tubes which, let's say, exhibit some qualities which you find in when you order tubes for yourself, and which of those qualities are maybe something that you could ignore, or other things which, you know, are going to affect whether the reed is good or not, or whether you can get to the reed, get to making a reed out of that particular tube or area of the tube. I'm trying to show you that there is a lot of, that the idea of quote-unquote selection is really, you know, it's not only the person who is growing the cane who is selecting what is good or not, but whatever you receive from really any cane provider is going to have to further be selected by you, the reed maker or / bassoonist or whatever. And what I would like for you to take away from this video is that, number one, this is something, it doesn't matter who you get your cane from, these sorts of tubes are going to appear, these problems are going to appear. Number two, you're not going to, if you buy a kilogram of cane and let's say that equals to, I don't know, let's say 100 tubes, you're not going to get 400 reeds from a kilogram because every tube is split into 4. It just doesn't work like that. So I want to give you some tips as well as to what you should be looking at, what you could avoid, and in general, what is out there from, you know, which is being grown. So what I have on the table at the moment, I mean, I have two different kinds of diameter checkers, and there's a point to that. This one is, it works very quick. It's great in that way. I should say that when you're working with tubes, I haven't actually decided for myself what is the best way, or when you are to determine the diameter of the piece of cane. So obviously from the tube stage, which is the most raw form, you're going to get a particular diameter. But what I notice, generally speaking, is that how you gouge the cane will determine also when you, like how the diameter will be when the cane is dry and gouged. So if it's eccentrically gouged, the diameter might open up a little bit, but if it gets wet, it might compress back to a smaller diameter. So when we're talking about diameter, I think in general, most people would say that it's at the most raw form, that's how we determine the diameter of the cane. But there is, with every piece of cane, at every stage, whether it's wet or dry, there is variation. And also, of course, also along the length of the tube, which is a whole other thing. But what I'm saying is that what we're measuring for are very general things. And sometimes having this quick, the point of me saying this is that having this quick diameter checker can be helpful. However, at this stage, when we're doing selection, this one, I think I got it from Medir, but actually it has a different UHL Technik.de. But I know that Reeds and Stuff sells a I mean, a very heavy duty version, which is all metal and more expensive. I think this cost me like $5 maybe, on Medier's website, I'm pretty sure. But in any case, I mean, it's obviously it's very cheap plastic, but it does the job. Um, and I'll show you why that will be important later. I also have a four-way splitter. I have also a three-way splitter, but this one is, I'm going to be making modern bassoon reeds from these tubes, so I don't need the cane to be super wide. And then I have the hammer to help, the mallet to help me with that. So let's look at, I want you to get into the mindset that there's no such thing as a brand of cane. I know that brands exist and people are selling you cane and they're branding it. But, and of course, that in general, depending on who the brand is, they may actually own a piece of land and they're growing it themselves. This is the case for sure for Medier, for Rigotti, for Van Doren or Silva. Those guys, they all own a piece of land. But there are other places, firms, where they say they make a selection, like Donzi, for example, say that they make a selection of cane from the best places in the Mediterranean, et cetera, et cetera. And so what that can mean, and I know that in the case of one or two other companies that I'm not going to name, that their cane can be so popular that they end up running out of their own stock in the middle of the year, and then they have to go to other people who are growing cane and they're selling it to the company and the company selling it to you, but it's not actually from their piece of land. So sometimes what you're receiving is not actually what is the brand, I guess that could, to say, so to speak. And in any case, what the point of me saying this is that every time you receive a kilogram or whatever it is that you order, you have to approach it as if it's something that you've never received before. That's also the case where the same piece of land may have different weather conditions from one field season to the next. So one crop one year might be really wet, and one crop one year might be really dry, coming from very dry conditions. And we had in 2021 in Switzerland, not Switzerland, sorry, in Europe, we had an extremely wet summer. But in the summer of 22 and 23, we had record heat, and in 22 we had record drought. So, these are things which, of course, affect every grow up. Every person who's producing cane is affected by the weather conditions, and so it's not, one year may be a good year and another year may be a bad year, and so therefore you have to continually collect cane from different places. It's not something where you can rely on one place forever and it's always going to be the same, quality or whatever. Especially now that climatic conditions are becoming so radical and variable. I made a bit of a mistake here in that I was hoping to make this video 2 days ago, and I just wanted to get the tubes soaked up a little bit so that they would be easier to work with. And in the end, I soaked them for 2 days and then kept replacing the water every 12 hours just because I ended up not having enough time to do the technical setup that's needed. As you can see, I have cameras all over the place. In general, I would say that you're going to, I mean, the splitting part aside, but it is useful, soaking the tubes or the split tubes is very useful because, number one, it eliminates a lot of like dust in the air when you're splitting, or afterwards when you're actually cutting the cane to length. So that's really helpful if it's wet. In that sense, it's avoiding dust going up in your face. And there are many reed makers out there and bassoonists who are actually like mildly allergic to the dust of reeds. And then the next thing, which is important and is important for anyone, is that the softer the material is and the more wet it is, the easier it is on your blades, whether it's your guillotines or your gouging blade or your pre-gouger, whatever it is. If the cane is wet, your blade is going to last longer. And that's something, and there for sure there are people who are going to say, yeah, but you should do it dry because then there's no variation, there's no shrinkage in the wood or whatever when you're getting to a later stage. Okay, sure, I take the point, but your blades are going to thank you for working with cane, which is saturated. Um, okay, so this is cane. These are tubes which are coming from a source which I can't speak about on the channel, unfortunately, at the moment. But what is interesting about this source is, and I bought 4 kilos recently. So I've gone through the 4 kilos and I've selected out a bunch of things where I that I see when I'm selecting, but this isn't representative of the source. It's just me finding all sorts of sort of weird and wonderful things. What you can see is that, I mean, in general, these tubes look relatively straight. This wasn't something that I was having a problem with this time, but often you can find cane which is really bendy or really twisted even. For example, this one is mildly uh, bendy, and you can see there's a curve happening on that side. Um, but it's not so bad, in fact. And of course, this is a real problem if you have really bendy cane, for example, there as well. If you have really bendy cane, the cane and the tubes themselves are cut very short, then of course you have problems with making a reed in the end because you don't have enough length of the tube to cut off and get a 120 millimeter straight piece of cane. Um, yeah, so that is something that I would say that the first thing that you're going to realize, and what I generally find is that if the cane is harvested from the wild, it is not grown, and that is if you're getting it from the wild, that means it's not any distributor that we know of. They're not growing the cane wild, but if it's from the wild, or if the location of the plantation itself is next to the sea or the ocean, then it's very windy in that area, in those areas, and cane which is constantly battered by wind ends up growing in a not straight. It doesn't often grow straight. But what generally you do find is that the straight pieces from those plantations, which are where there's a large amount of really twisted cane, the straight pieces often have a really good density and are very make for very good concert reeds or performing reeds. I would say in general what we have as a sort of, I don't want to say it's a crisis, but in general at the moment from the sources that I go to, which are the sources that most people go to, um, cane is more often than not too soft than too hard. And of course, that's a very blanket general statement. And I would need to collect a huge amount of data in a scientific way if I wanted to show you exactly what I meant. But I can tell you that in general, the cane, I do two different kinds of density tests, and in any case, in one very common one, I just weigh the cane which is being pre-gouged and cut to length. So it's a very broad stroke test. 75%, no, even more than that. 80% of the time, I'm throwing away cane because it's too light rather than being too heavy. So we're here at this sort of selection table. And what I am going to show you are a couple of markers, visual indications to me of things where I need to consider how I'm going to proceed with these tubes. And so, if you have a piece of cane which sort of looks like this one. I'm going to give you we have a tube here. If your tube is generally looking like this, it's nice and golden. Okay, yeah, it's got a little bit of brown on it, whatever. This is generally, it looks great. Why not? Let's make a reed from this, and pretty much we know it's going to work. But and in some cases, you can buy cane from providers, and pretty much every tube looks like that. It's not often, but you know, some of the more expensive people like Lavoro, I found, often the tubes end up looking, you know, the vast majority of tubes have no sort of marker indicators on them, no brown or texturization or sort of dry watermarks or anything. So this is good, but this piece of cane, for example, has this brown line here. And what I could do to what I would consider when selecting this tube, first of all, is I would now think this might be immediately a good place. And if I'm not sure if you can, yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell from this angle. Yeah, it's hard to tell. But actually the line, the brown line, it continues in a all the way down the length of the reed. You can, yeah, actually you can see it. So you can see this line there, and it's all the same sort of fiber. And what I would definitely do right away is I'd say, okay, I'm definitely going to, when I split the cane, I want that to be one of the places where it splits, the cane splits open. But what I haven't done is it's relatively round. Sorry, the table's a bit in the way here. It's relatively round. It's not super. So this is where it might be important for me to take out the dial indicator. Not the dial indicator, yeah, so we've got 24 to 20 to 28. So you can see that because the tube is not actually round. So if because the tube is not very round here, you can see that there's a massive variation in what the diameter is. So what I would like to do is I'd like to make sure, for sure, that, for example, this area, which is at about 25, which is, I think, roughly the smallest diameter. I want to, oh yeah, a bit under. So let's try and make that area fit underneath. Make that one full piece. This is not a great tube to select from, and what you're going to realize here is that actually there's a lot of waste in some of these pieces. I think this is the one. Yeah. So I have here now a piece which is on the closer to 25 than 24. And then here comes the interesting part. So I'm going to, I mean, obviously we know that I want to make sure that really there is no air gap at the center where this piece of cane meets the gauge. And so what you can end up having is you can have, because this tool here is such a general tool, what could happen is that you split the piece of cane, and yeah, you get something which is close to 25, but what ends up happening is you get a piece where the apex of the curvature is off center. And this one is quite good. And you can select every possible piece of the tube. So here, for example, here's another split piece from the same tube. And you can see there's some daylight. And it's not even across it's a little bit more to the right than the center. And so this is not going to be a particularly good piece of cane, but what we can see is that this is 27. And if I look down at that point, It's okay. I'm just sorry, I'm just checking myself. Yeah. So there's at here. Oh, am I aiming to focus? It's really hard because the table is so. But sort of, you can almost see it on just on the right, below the number 7. It's not. It's there's just a little gap there. You can see it opening up now. And so, for example, if I was, yeah, now it's okay, right? So what I would probably do myself is that, and that area was about right here. So probably what I would do if I wanted a 27 millimeter diameter piece of cane, I would cut the cane there. But what you can also notice, maybe, is that the cane is a little bit bendy this way. And so this is actually not a very usable piece of cane. It's not very straight in this dimension. You can see also on this piece that it curves a little bit, but probably if we cut it there, it would be all right. And it's straight there, but you can see this is exactly what I was showing you earlier. So I would not make a piece of cane from it because there's a bit of, there is a bit of a bump. And so it wouldn't be usable. What you find often when you can get to quite a late stage with some of this cane before you realize, like, oh, I shouldn't have wasted my time. And what I find with pieces which have this sort of line through it, if that's close enough to the point where you can't shape it off later, it will end up creating a line of compressed fibers down in the profile of the blade. So you'll end up having a blade which looks totally normal, but then there's this very dense line which is underneath this area. Yeah, so also garbage. The reason why originally I picked this tube, it's a bit curvy, this one. Yeah. Okay. What's the diameter? 26. It's not bad. Oh no, it's okay. So, for example, this is the second of the 4 pieces off of this tube, and it looks just fine. Maybe a little gap on the left, maybe. Oops. No, it's fine. So this is also another good piece. But the reason why I wanted to show this piece, this tube at all, is because there's a change in color on the tube, which you can see. I'm just going to put it a bit further away. So it's kind of brown, and it's golden on this side and a bit brown on this side. And in general, I find that this sort of thing is perfectly fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't look nice, but it's not going to cause a problem in the reed at all. Someone may disagree with me, but that is their right. So those things are ready to be, I have 2 pieces here which are ready to go to be cut to length. Next thing, okay. So here's a tube which has all sorts of interesting colors and also textures. So this is what I would call a watermark. And this, I think, is caused because a leaf or a part of the sort of the vegetable meat from the cane itself, that like sort of the stuff that when you look at a panda bear who eats the who's eating bamboo, he pulls off some skin off of the bamboo before eating the wood, the meat, and that's sort of what sort of got dried off onto the tube in the sun. And I can feel that this is actually there's a texture here. It's not just a coloration. And if there is a texture on the top of the tube, that is more often than not going to affect your profile, and it's not going to be it's not going to work. It's going to create weird uneven densities along the fibers of the profile, because in fact the blade it of the reed, even though we're cutting down, we're not cutting down that far down from the bark. So this sort of texturization still matters to the outcome of the reed. Now we move on. We have some of this sort of dirty stuff. Okay, you can see dirt fibers. This is really close. This I can't even see. You can see actual little particles here, which my naked eye can't see. So I'm seeing the cane in a different way for the first time, along with you. But you also see these you've got these long marks, which I would want to split away. And then you have this weird sort of what it kind of looks like it got infected somehow. But it's dirty. But not only is dirt coming off, as you can see when I move my fingers, but I can feel that everywhere where you see this brown line, everywhere I feel that that's actually indented into the tube, and that's no good. And maybe this section could make a reed. Yeah, this section might be able to make a reed, but it's quite narrow, and it is a bit bendy there. It's not, I wouldn't say it's slight, but it is there. And because that's the case, and you can also see the bend a little bit there. I wouldn't use this tube at all. This is just garbage, but I think it's useful for you to see that sort of thing. On another tube, we have a similar problem. We have this, again, this white stuff, which is blanketing almost the entire side of the tube. We have more of that black line stuff. And then the tube is quite bendy as well. And again, this tube is garbage. So we're really making some progress here very quickly. Same sort of thing here. This is even worse. This is really bad. You can see like there's a lot of material here, and I can feel it immediately with my thumb. It's no good. This, for sure, you want to split this away. This is no good. And there's a bump here. Another piece we would want to throw away, and split that. If I was going to split the cane, I would split it there. Whenever you are splitting tubes, you want to make sure that one of the seams, that this seam here is actually split right down there. You don't want that ending up in the middle of a piece of cane. Let's move on to this one. This one I find interesting. I very rarely see one like this, but you can tell that there is a texture there. So like absolutely this area can't be used to make a reed, but this is fine so long as it's maybe not in the blade area, but if it's in the tube area, no problem. And the rest of the tube looks pretty much okay. So it's really only that place there which is no good. But of course, at this point, we got to check. Yeah, 25 going to 26, just above 26. Yeah, 25 to 20. Ooh, looks like 23 and a half one place. So let's check but in general, quite round. Doesn't look super problematic. And some people would say at this point to check the diameter now and then split. So if you can actually find the apex of the curve, then you want to split exactly in that place. 24 is too small. So it is 25. Yeah, so if I split, this could be quite a good piece of cane like that. If I split it exactly like that, which I will. I'm just going to do. And you see sometimes people drawing this out in pen or pencil on the tube itself. for the purposes of this video, I'm just doing it like that, but you could be more anal retentive about yeah. And that is working just fine. And it's quite a straight piece. I would cut this area. It just slightly bends back up right here, but you can hardly tell. And you can also see that the diameter just slightly narrows right there. So yeah, I would cut there. I'm just gonna mark it so I remember. But that's good. Now, what happened to the other three pieces? This is garbage, this one. This one. So I don't have a choice. Already by looking at the bottom of this, I can see it curves. It's like got an S curve, right? It curves down and then curves up. It is relatively straight. Yeah, it is quite straight. So I have no choice. If I'm going to use the cane, I have to cut on both sides. And now I need to check whether this is... No, this is quite... it's 26. Yep, it looks fine at 26. Oops. There we are. Looks just fine there. So that could be 26 millimeters in diameter. I'll just indicate too as a reminder. There and there. And this last piece, yeah, and I think this might become something. So obviously I have to cut there because it bends down, and you can also see that here. 26 maybe? 25. 25 millimeters in diameter, and there's no sort of air, there's no air gap when I put it under. So that's great. I have a couple of pieces now, and these are garbage. Another kind of tube that you'll find, this is super, super big. It's a huge tube. And also like really odd right there. Not round at all. But you can see, look at that. There's a huge... So obviously this can't be the surface of the cane, so you have to split down that line. But also the tube is really bendy. You can see that there's quite a curve to it. It actually goes down and up again, and then back down. So there's really nothing I can do with this. This in particular, like a piece like this, which is so large and abnormally shaped, it makes you wonder if either someone is being careless when they're shipping it to you, or they know that this is just weight, which they can throw in and say, you got a kilogram, but there's actually 20 grams there, which, or even more, 30, 40, 50 grams, which they know is just completely useless. It's just garbage, which they sold to you. Next, okay, so sometimes you see people complain about tubes which are like this, and this is something which I find characteristic from certain grow ops, and in general, I find that this sort of tube is really not a problem at all. There are some obvious things which need to be avoided. So here we have another seam, as you can see there, that needs to be split right here. But for example, this sort of thing, if this is not in the blade area, this is not a problem at all. It's just a discoloration. There isn't any texture to it. And then there is some interesting patterns on the wood, but that's it. It's just a sort of visual thing. It doesn't affect the texture of the tube, and in the end, it's not going to affect the reed at all, so long as, of course, the density and everything is all right. So I'm going to split it along the seam before checking diameter, because I know that the seam has to be split away. And I got a couple of pieces here. This one is exactly 25, which is great. And it's a little bit curvy, but I think we'll get a reed if we sort of cut away like that. Next. This one is the first one where you see like there's it's sort of bowed, but if you can cut away the middle, sorry, if you can separate the edges from the middle, this is also very good at 25. Probably we'll have a reed which works just fine. And here's the interesting part. So already I know some people will look at this and go, ooh, I don't like this. Conveniently, it curves a little bit here, so we would cut away if the diameter is okay. This is not 25, this is 26. Yep. 26. And then we have one, which is a bit like that, or it's a bit high here, it goes down, and then it curves off again. So if it does work, it has to be cut like that. And this is very good at 25. So no air gap there. That's great. So you get the idea already from me covering, you know, we've looked at what, 5 tubes already, 6 tubes, and you can see the sort of process that's going through. I just want to cover a couple of other things. Some people might complain of a long tube, receiving a long tube like this. I think this is fine, especially if the tubes are relatively bendy, because the longer the tube you're going to receive, the more likely you're going to find a straight portion from that piece, and so you can almost tell it's not bad. It's quite straight, this one, and I would definitely split the seam down here and move on from there. But in general, when you look at the texture on this piece of cane, it's totally usable. I would, you know, maybe avoid having this in the blade if you could, but it's fine. In the tube of the reed, it's totally fine. Also this, totally fine as well. Same sort of thing here. You can tell that the cane is quite yellow on one and then brown on the other side. Not such a huge problem with this sort of discoloration. Of course, you want to avoid having this sort of thing in the tube. And what I can do, I can feel already there's a lot of texture there, so we don't want to have that part on the reed at all. We would try and avoid having that area on a piece of cane that we would use. But the rest of this is fine. This is relatively round, so we'd probably get some success there. But you can see here, for example, on this piece, no matter what the diameter is, if this is on the reed, if this is in the central part of a gouged piece, this is not going to create a profiled piece of cane, which works. But that's not to say that this area would not work. So you end up having to split, you know, you might only get 2 usable pieces from a tube, and you have to split the tube a specific way in order to get something that can work. Maybe here, actually, you know what, let's try it. But I don't, it's actually quite a small, it's 25, 26. Yeah, actually right there, oh, it's 26 millimeters in diameter, and it's very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it here, knowing that only this piece is usable. And no. And when I look on the inside, you come to the next problem. This is something that I see a lot in cane from Europe at the moment, and you have this sort of really brown, dirty. I don't know how to explain it. It's in the fiber itself. So either it's sort of molded a little bit, or it's something which is it's a disease that's grown in. I have no idea. I'm no expert. Um, I'm not someone who works with plants. I'm not a botanist, but that's not the right word. But in any case, point is that what you're going to find is if you decided to take this piece of cane further, if you pre-gouged it, you might also find after pre-gouging that this brown discoloration is also it's going past the point that you would cut away. It's going much closer towards the bark than you would like. And then what ends up happening is that you gouge it, and the cane is still on the inside of the gouge, still brown, and not sort of white or golden, and discolored, not an even coloration. And in general, I would say that it doesn't lead to results which work. So I think this is probably I can sometimes lose half an order to this problem. Do we have, just to give you an idea, I have just on the bottom, this is something which is good, and this is not good on the top. So you can see the difference there. It's subtle on camera, but it's very obvious when it's in front of you in real life. So that's that. And so I throw that whole batch away. Here's something that I've been seeing with this. You see this sometimes. So you get a lot of meat on the inside of the tube, and some people who are, like some of the sort of witch doctors of reed making in Europe will tell you that, oh yeah, if there's a lot of meat, oh that's great. That this means the cane is going to be really hard, and it's just a characteristic of some tubes. It can mean that the cane is hard. It can mean also that the cane is going to be soft. So I don't take this as an indicator of anything. What is problematic is that if you don't use the Rieger splitter, which it has, the blades, it's sharp right from the point that you insert it towards the inside of the tube. But if you use the Reeds and Stuff one, which is actually around, so this is like a round, I don't know what you call this, pole, with 3 blades, but halfway down. What can happen is that you try and put it in and it doesn't actually fit. So that can be a problem when you have cane, which is of a small diameter, but it also has a lot of this sort of meat on the inside. That's okay though if you're using the Rieger one to split. I will not go any further with this because I have quite a lot of, as you can see, it's almost flat. So this area is all flat going all the way down, and you have the seam beside it. And so we know at least 1/4, if not a third of this tube is unusable already just by looking at it. So this isn't like my normal, this is selected tubes from 4 kilograms of cane, which looks as if it's been selected from the wild. So the cane is much more crazy than usual. This as well. I'm not a huge fan of this white stuff. It's also a bit textured here. But I think maybe there's a reed to be had in this area if it fits the diameter. And what I see is that it's quite round. It's nice. So why not? Yeah. Exactly where I was pointing out. It pretty much, it's 25. in diameter right there. I'm having real success with this thing today, but it's not always the case. No good. No good. No good. It's garbage. And this was the, But now, look, so the area that I really want to use is this area when I'm looking at the top. This area down here, it's a little bit, it's got a bit of texture to it, which I think would be a problem if I was profiling it. Profiling this area, of course it's on the edge, it's not such a problem. But if I turn the cane inside, what you'll see is that it really bends here and here. So the only reed I can get is from there to there, maybe. And I'm not sure if that would make a reed. But I'm going to check because this is the closest piece I've come to a really tough decision. And I don't have this set to 120. I certainly need as much cane cut away from that side as possible. Yeah, this is going to be tough. I think this could be a usable piece in the end. It's a bit, wait, hold on, let's see. This is a good way to test if the cane is straight. It's very straight. Is really at the center of this piece of cane. Yeah, is that focusing? Yes. Good. So you can see through this demonstration that there's a negotiation that takes place when you're selecting these pieces. You've got to cover not only like how the cane looks, whether it's textured, whether there's a sort of a seam going down the cane, whether you think that the visual markings, the brown or white discolorations on the tubes themselves, whether that, once profiled, whether that goes below the epidermis is what I mean to say. So you have to make that judgment call. You've also got to check whether the cane is straight or not, and then if the cane is not going to be 120 millimeters long, those tubes. So what you're going to also have, another added dimension, is that when you actually cut the cane itself, you're going to have another negotiation to take place to make sure that the cane is as good as it possibly can be. So you can see that a lot of time can be spent, especially with really tricky tubes, just trying to get the best and most usable piece of cane out of each tube. Sometimes you can get 4 perfect right in, and you can cut it at any length you want because they're perfectly straight and whatever. But I guarantee you, a kilogram of tubes like that is very hard to come by, even if you do pay a premium. What I've been showing you here are the worst of the worst, I guess you could say. I didn't have so many which were really actually twisted, but you had a lot which had that sort of S shape or were bent a little bit, and a lot of discoloration and things. But what's good for me now is that after having shown you what I've been looking at, I have at least 2 or 3 kilos of like relatively good material, which is left in the same batch. So I'm very happy to have spent this time usefully for myself. So if there's anything that you should be taking away from this video, it's that these sorts of decisions around selecting, this sort of thing happens no matter where you buy your cane. Wherever it's grown, you're going to encounter twisted, unstraight, strange diameters, not perfectly round cane, watermarks, strange discolorations. You're going to encounter that everywhere. It's an organic material. It doesn't grow in a uniform way. And what is going to be useful for you is to not simply throw away the entire tube. It's to actually find the usable piece within that tube or usable pieces. But of course, you're always going to want to go for something that is as straight that, sometimes you're going to have to cut the straight bit out of something which is relatively bendy. So that's it for today. If you like these videos and you would like to see more of them, please do consider becoming a patron via Patreon or by making an order at bassoons.ch. Thanks very much for watching, and take it easy. Bye-bye.